Helen Keller was born on June 27, 1880 in Tuscumbia, Alabama. She was the daughter of Arthur and Kate Keller. She was their first child, but Arthur had been married once before and had 2 sons. Helen was a very smart little girl and learned many things at an early age. Later, Helen wrote of her early life saying, "The beginning of my life was simple and much like every other little life. I came, I saw, I conquered, as the first baby in the family always does." But at about 19 months, Helen Keller became very sick with a high fever. The Kellers' doctor did not know what sickness it was, and he thought that she would die. But after about 2 weeks, Helen's fever broke, and the Kellers thought that she was well again. But she did not come when the dinner bell was rung anymore, and she didn't turn her head when her name was called. The Kellers realized that the fever had left Helen not only deaf, but blind as well. They took Helen to a doctor, but he said that nothing could be done. Helen began to cling to her mother's skirts and follow her everywhere. She tried to communicate with her family by using made-up hand signals, but they had a hard time understanding what she wanted. If she was not given what she wanted, she would throw a tantrum and would scream and kick at everyone around her. By the time she was 5, Helen had invented over 50 hand signals to help her communicate. Even though Helen was deaf and blind, it did not stop her from making mischief. On one occasion, when Helen's mother was in the pantry, Helen took the pantry keys and locked her mother inside for 3 hours. In 1885, Arthur and Kate had their second child, Mildred. Helen became very jealous of Mildred because she took up so much of her mother's attention. Helen was so angry and jealous of her sister that one day, when she found her sleeping in her cradle, Helen purposely pushed it over. But baby Mildred was not hurt because Mrs. Keller had caught her. The Kellers took Helen to another doctor who suggested that they go see Alexander Graham Bell. He invented the first telephone in 1876. He lived in Washington, D.C. When they went to see him, Helen was almost 6 years old. Helen would later write about her visit with Dr. Bell saying, "He understood my signs and I knew it and loved him at once." Dr. Bell suggested that they write to the Perkins Institution for the Blind, which was in Boston, Massachusetts. The Kellers took his advice and got a reply from Michael Anagnos, the head of the Perkins School, saying that he thought Anne Sullivan, who was called Annie, might be able to teach Helen. Annie had been partly blind as a child, but had regained full vision because of surgery. It took some time to convince her, but Annie finally consented to go. On March 3, 1887, Annie Sullivan arrived at the Kellers' home. Helen walked over to Annie, thinking she was her mother, but was surprised and angry when she discovered that she was a stranger. After Helen had calmed down, she wanted to know what was inside Annie's travel bag. She thought that Annie may have brought some sort of treat, as many people did, out of pity. She began to rummage through it, but she found no candy. Mrs. Keller had to pull the bag away from Helen, but Helen became very angry and kicked and screamed at her mother. Annie held her little watch up against Helen's face. Helen felt the vibrations from the ticking and began to calm down. The next day, while Annie was in her room, Helen helped her unpack her things. As they were unpacking Annie's trunk, Helen found a doll. It was from the children at the Perkins School. Some of the doll's clothes had been made by Laura Bridgman, who had once been a student of the Perkins School. She was also deaf and blind, but had learned to speak and use sign language. By using sign language, Annie slowly spelled the word doll into Helen's hand. Helen didn't respond. Annie took the doll and again spelled the word into Helen's hand. Helen thought that Annie had stolen the doll from her, and Helen got mad. She threw a tantrum. Annie tried to calm her down, but it did not work. Annie then got a piece of cake and spelled cake into Helen's hand while holding the cake under Helen's nose. Annie did this multiple times until Helen spelled the word back into Annie's hand. Annie gave Helen the cake, but Helen still did not understand that C-A-K-E meant something. Helen also repeated the word doll back to Annie. Annie then returned the doll to Helen. Helen later wrote, "I did not know that I was spelling a word or even that words existed. I was simply making my fingers go in monkey-like motion." For the next few days, Helen ignored Annie. Helen had been used to taking food off her family's plates. At mealtime, she would walk around the table taking what she wanted and leaving what she didn't. No one tried to stop her or teach her manners. The Kellers would let Helen do many things out of pity. Helen almost always got her way. But But Annie would not let Helen eat off her plate. She wanted to teach Helen manners. So, when Annie kept her plate out of Helen's reach, Helen started kicking and screaming. Annie asked the rest of the Keller family to leave the room, so it was just Annie and Helen alone. After they had left, Annie went on calmly eating her food while Helen lay on the floor kicking. When Helen realized that her family was not in the room, she tried to push over Annie's chair, but she was not able to do so. After hours of struggle, Annie finally got Helen to eat with a spoon and fold her napkin. Annie later wrote, to get her to do the simplest things, such as combing her hair or washing hands, it was necessary to use force, and of course, a distressing scene followed. The Keller family tried to help Helen with everything, but they were getting in Annie's way. Annie was unable to make progress with Helen while her family was there, so Annie decided that in order to make progress with her, Helen needed to be separated from her family while Annie taught her. The Kellers allowed Annie to take Helen to a little cottage that was near their home, but before Annie took Helen to the cottage, she took Helen on a long carriage ride. It now seemed to Helen that the little cottage was far away from her house. Annie did not want Helen to know how near her family was to her. For weeks, Annie struggled to teach Helen, and in the process, 2 of Annie's teeth were knocked out by Helen. On April 5, 1887, a little over a month after Annie's arrival, Helen and Annie went outside to a water pump. Annie let water run over Helen's hands and slowly spelled W-A-T-E-R onto Helen's hand. Helen began spelling water back to Annie again and again. Helen finally understood what Annie had been trying to teach her. Later, Helen wrote, everything had a name, and each name gave birth to a new thought. Helen now wanted to know the name of everything. She would point to what she wanted to know the name of, and Annie would spell the word into her hand. When Helen pointed to Annie, she spelled teacher into Helen's hand. Helen learned the names of over 30 things that day, and she continued learning her whole life. By age 9, Helen began learning to speak. She continued to develop her skills of speech throughout her entire life. Helen met Mark Twain, the author of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, in 1895 when she was 14. They remained good friends until Mark Twain's death in 1910. Helen attended the Perkins School for 4 years. She then spent a year at the Cambridge School for Young Ladies and then went to Radcliffe College. In 1904, she graduated from Radcliffe College and became the first deaf and blind person to graduate with honors. After graduating, she worked hard to make things better for the handicapped, especially the deaf and blind. She traveled to many places and gave speeches all over the world. Anne Sullivan and Helen Keller lived together until Annie's death in 1936. Helen wrote a total of 12 books, including The Story of My Life, which was published in 1902. Helen never married or had children. On June 1st, 1968, Helen Keller died in her sleep at age 87 because of a series of strokes in 1961. Helen Keller changed millions of people's lives for the better as she traveled the world giving speeches. Her message of courage and hope will always be remembered by the ones who have heard it. A few of Helen Keller's famous quotes: life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all. The only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision. The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart. And if you can dream it, you can do it. I would like to thank my mom and dad for letting me enter and my family for helping me with everything. Thank you for watching my presentation. I hope you enjoyed learning about Helen Keller as much as I did.